On the back of a giant-sized turtle are 4 huge elephants. And on the back of these elephants is a huge planet-sized disc, teeming with life. Welcome to the Discworld. Hello and welcome to the Friday Fantasy Show from the Bottled Imp, exploring the realms of fantasy. My name is Ken Boyter, and today we're going to take a look at The Colour of Magic by Terry Pratchett. Now this is the first book in the Discworld series. Now I believe there's about 41 of these. A few of them are short stories, and like a crazy fool, I've decided to read one a week. Yes, that's right, one a week, because it's the Great Fantasy Challenge. For those of you that don't know, we do have a Monday show that's going out. Series 1 is 8 episodes, and they go out every Monday, so obviously you can check them out. And in that, I'm reading one a week, and then every episode I kind of discuss briefly about the book. Now, this is the first full review of the Discworld series. Now, what is it all about? Well, Discworld, as I say, it's fantasy, but there's also humour thrown in. And I read these way back. It was first published in 1983. I think I was about 14 or 15, so I read it about 1988, 89, I think. That gives away my age. And I was instantly hooked. I think for me, the big draw of it was the humour. And this book was the start really of me wanting to write fantasy. It really inspired that because of the humour, because of the kind of quick pace of it, and also he does a lot of asides. Terry Pratchett kind of goes off on a lot of tangents, and that's kind of how my brain works as well. And I hadn't noticed this quote until I read it recently, but it says here, "The wickedest and most original fantasy since The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy," and I totally agree with that. So let's find out just exactly what is The Colour of Magic. The Colour of Magic, it was the book that kick-started the whole Discworld series, and it was phenomenally successful. Millions of copies were sold worldwide in terms of the whole Discworld series, and there's been adaptations of individual books. There's also of TV, and also comic books and video games. And there's even a few board games as well set in the Discworld universe. So just what is the fuss all about? Well, as I said before, it takes place in Discworld, and Discworld it's quite unusual. Giant sea turtle that floats through the universe. On the back of that, 4 elephants that are obviously floating at the same time, and also a big, huge disc. So in the Discworld, as it sounds, the planet is flat, and obviously that comes with its own perils. But we'll get into that in a little bit later on. So the actual story, though, involves a tourist. And it's the first known tourist of Discworld. And his name is Twoflower. And he is visiting the biggest city on the Discworld, and that is Morport. I knew I'd mispronounce that. Morport is the biggest city. And he arrives with his rather unusual luggage. And I say unusual because it can walk by itself. Yes, it's got hundreds of little feet that carry the luggage around, and also it seems to have a personality and thoughts of its own. It doesn't quite speak, but it has, like the lid of it, when you lift up the lid, or when the lift is opened up by itself, there's razor sharp teeth there. And also it looks like it's kind of like a bag of holding, because it just looks like it's a never-ending chest where you can just pull anything out. Well, that's what it seems like, and it is owned by Twoflower, and as I say, it's a magical luggage, and they arrive in the city, and as you can imagine, when you're a tourist, you're a little bit naive, aren't you? You're not quite sure what's going on, so you like to get involved. You like to go into pubs and cafes and ask people and kind of just soak up the atmosphere. Well, if you're a tourist, you can stand out like a sore thumb, especially if you're wealthy. And Twoflower is incredibly wealthy, and he doesn't quite know the exchange rate, so he's kind of overpaying people. If he's tipping people, he's overpaying them. And of course, that attracts nasty and unsavoury people, especially in this city, because it kind of is known for its thievery and its kind of unsavoury characters. But to Twoflower's rescue, kind of, there is a terrible, rubbish and useless wizard named Rincewind who comes across his path, and eventually, I won't go into the details, but he becomes Twoflower's guide to the city. So that's the premise of this novel. As I say, the Discworld, all the books take place in the Discworld, so there is that overarching kind of universe. This one does concentrate though on Twoflower and Rincewind, but there are a few other characters that do crop up along the way. There's Death. Death is personified and becomes a character itself. And there are other characters kind of like that. There's tropes and cliches along the way. So the characters, you may recognise them from other fantasy, like Conan the Barbarian. It's kind of a play on that. There's a barbarian that's kind of very similar, but he takes the Mickey, you know, he satires these cliches. There are several themes that run through the book, but they're not necessarily always obvious. And I think when I was thinking, right, what are the themes? And normally they kind of, you know, in a novel, they kind of stand out quite well, and you can work out kind of what the author's trying to get at and what he wants to explore in a novel. With this, I kind of had to really think hard because it's not totally obvious. And I think that's because there's so many concepts and ideas that runs through this novel in the background, and he goes off on tangents, puts little asterisks, and you have to read at the bottom what it means, and he kind of goes off into different thoughts that you kind of get lost in it all a little bit. It kind of seemed a little bit rambly and a little bit shambolic, which is great. And the action kind of zips along, so you kind of, you know, it's almost like it's too fast for you to breathe and think within the novel. But there are some themes, and I think they are things like this: innocence and being naive. So obviously, if you're a tourist, as I said before, you're kind of exploring new realms, aren't you? There you go. You're exploring, you're on holiday, and you kind of want to soak up the atmosphere and the customs and the traditions of a new place. But of course, that is a little bit of a two-edged sword, double-edged sword, because yes, you're exploring the realms and you're getting new experiences, but you are also then prone to being taken advantage of. So that kind of leads into where you could get misled, you could fall into the wrong company, and therefore you can kind of put yourself in danger. Now, obviously, if you're in danger, then anything can happen, and and therefore your nice sort of holiday that you thought was going to be a bit jolly kind of turns into more of a survival exercise, I guess. And that's certainly the case with Twoflower and Rincewind. And of course, teaming up with Rincewind isn't necessarily the best idea because, as I say, he isn't a brilliant wizard. And the reason why that is, I'm not giving too many spoilers away, is that when he went to the University of Wizardry, the Unseen University, then he actually snuck in, and there was this big powerful book that contains 8 spells that are really powerful, and he managed to kind of open it, and you're not meant to, but one of them jumped in his head and got lodged in there, and he doesn't know what the spell does, but it means that he can't learn other spells because they're all afraid of that first spell that went into his brain. And therefore, he can't cast it, it just seems to have a life of its own. So he's kind of a bit useless as a wizard. So that's not the sort of person that you want to be helping you out if you are getting into a few scrapes, as Twoflower does. There's also Terry Pratchett goes off into, as I say, the concepts. And one of them is the nature of existence as well. And that's sort of, scattered and peppered all the way through the novel. There are lots of asides about things like, being a flat world, the Discworld and the perils of that, the cosmology of it, the origins, evolution, and the eventual fate of this universe as well. So there's lots of ideas that flow through. I won't go into them all, but they're quite gems, and they kind of leave you just pondering. You kind of go, oh, okay, yeah, so let me think about that a little bit more. But of course, you're kind of then swept along with the action as well, because they keep getting into these scrapes. There's also religion. There is, and it touches upon this, and I do believe further down into the series, a few more books into it, he then starts exploring religion, as a main theme. But there are small gods, is what they're called, and they kind of, they're what is it, on a disc? I can't remember now, or a mountain, I can't remember, but it's kind of in the centre, it's the hub, and that's the centre of the disc, and then above that, that's where all the small gods hang out. And they are very, very similar to the Greek gods and the Roman gods, where there's many of them, and they've all got their own personalities, and they're all kind of rooting for individual kind of characters on the Discworld, and they can kind of have an influence, and it's almost like a game to them. So that is a good theme as well, but it's not massively explored in this, but it's kind of touched upon. It's sort of, and this is what I mean by there's loads of concepts and ideas that run through this, because he throws in loads and then kind of teases out a few more than others. As I mentioned before, there's death and the nature of death and dying. And that's actually personified, as I said before. So you've got the classic looking death with the, the hood and the scythe, riding a white horse, and kind of, but he's got a bit of personality, which is cool. But he's kind of as you think death would act and behave, but death has got quite a dry sense of humour as well. And so that's quite cool to kind of explore, I guess, the spirit world, or the what happens after you die world. Through a character that's already there, and death kind of doesn't really take responsibility and says, well, it's not me that's killing you, it's fate. If it's your time, then it's your time. Have a word with fate, because fate is a god, and it's like, have a word with fate, not me, I'm just here to kind of do the work. I'm like, doing the nitty-gritty kind of, cutting your soul from your body. So that's an interesting concept as well. And again, later on, there's Mort, which is one, I think it's the 4th Discworld novel, that gets the main theme, that he is the main character. Well, the second main character. Anyway, there's tropes and cliches, like I mentioned before. So you have things like, as I mentioned before, the barbarians, and the classic, muscular barbarians, and kind of, they're not necessarily very bright, but they're very muscly. You have things like the magic and what is magic. So it explores quite a lot of magic. I guess that would be the main cliche and trope within this book. Then also you have things like what a wizard is, what it is to be a wizard. And there's also a witch that crops up in this one. And also what it is to be in the nature of a hero. So he does look, and there's loads of others as well. So he kind of, so if you know your fantasy, so I read this when I hadn't really read too much fantasy. So I didn't really get a lot of the references. But now, yes, I can see exactly where all the references are. Well, I'm sure I've missed loads as well. But you can kind of, you get to know, if you know your fantasy, you can sort of go, oh yeah, okay, he's poking fun at that one, he's poking fun at that one. So that's very enjoyable if you do like your fantasy. Overall, I did really, really enjoy it. It's fun, it zips along. If I was going to say, I mean, the strengths are that there's, as I say, it's a great concept. I love the idea of the disc floating through the space on the elephants on a turtle. I mean, that's great. I think that's from ancient classical Greece. I'm not sure. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere before. Now, Terry Pratchett was well read. He used to love reading as a kid. He used to go to the library and read all sorts of books, of tales of adventure, factual books. So he just absorbed all of this. And what he did is he just put it all out there in this first novel. You have an upside down flying mountain, which causes its own problems, obviously. You've got the luggage, which I love, the fact that it's got its mind of its own. It's got little feet, great concept. Again, a bit like a mimic from D&D. You've got the concept of death. That's good to explore that, isn't it? You've got the beginnings of a magical system as well. So you can kind of see that he's working out how magic works in the Discworld region. So for example, there's a bit, I won't spoil it too much, but like the nature of what dragon is, there's a bit of magic and that's connected to dragons in this, and for me it's like, oh okay, that's cool, I like that. And again, you've got the gods. I think, when it first mentions the gods, you kind of think, oh okay, so now I'm getting more of an overall complete picture, because obviously universes, when you create a fantasy world, it's also about the beliefs. It's about the belief systems of the characters that are there, not just the physicalities of, what's gravity like, and does it have 2 moons and all the kind of physical stuff. No, it's all about the actual civilizations as well. So I would say that, if I was going to sort of be a bit critical with it, which, obviously I should be, it's a bit choppy. It's a bit uneven in the writing, and also because it kind of does go off a bit too much. There's layers within layers within layers, and then you start thinking, hang on, where's this? I felt I got a little bit lost in it, but not too much. And it does zip along, and the locations change quite a lot as well. And that's kind of good, but I felt that I needed a bit more focus, maybe a bit slowing down, a bit more focus on, maybe one storyline that's a bit more fleshed out. So it does feel like that he's maybe had this idea for a number of years, and that he wanted just to throw everything at it to really kind of kickstart it and really make it an interesting world. So there's a kind of bombardment of ideas and concepts, which because he's done 41 of them, that he does explore pretty much, I don't know all of them because I haven't read them all, but I'm on more now. I'm on book 4. So there is a change in style of the writing style, and the characters can be a little bit one-dimensional, but they're fun and you kind of like them. They're intriguing. You do want to know what happens to them. There's not a massive sort of story arc or characterization arc that goes on within the characters, but you kind of forgive that because there's just so much in here to get your teeth into and to get your brain thinking about that you kind of overlook that. And because I personally like the characters and I want to know what happened with them, I didn't really mind. It would be nice. I don't know how often Rincewind crops up because I've not read them yet. I think he does crop up once again. Obviously, in the next one, The Light Fantastic, he crops up because that's a direct sequel. But I'm pretty sure it crops up again and again. So I'm hoping there's going to be some more character development there. What else would I say is that yes, the humour is pretty strong. It's kind of satire and it's a bit left field, a bit quirky. It kind of goes off into tangents, which is great. It's not laugh out loud, but it's kind of amusing, and that for me is good enough. As I say, I loved all the concept, and you can see Terry Pratchett really wanting to tease these out in future books. And this one does end on a cliffhanger, as I say. It kind of gets wrapped up, but there's a little bit leeway, yes, and there's a sequel, which then The Light Fantastic carries on directly. From then on in, I think every single one is a standalone one. So, it's certainly not the best Discworld novel, but it is one that kind of it sets the scene. So if you're a bit of a completionist, I would say, yeah, read this one because you get an idea of where he's coming from and where, you can see the influences. Obviously, if you know them, you can see where he's been influenced and how he's been influenced. And this one also inspired me to start writing fantasy because I like this. As I say, it was very similar to the way my brain works. I like the humour of it. And I just like the fact that kind of not almost anything can happen, but just thinking outside the box, like the disc with the elephants and the turtle. Think differently. What would be different in your world? And again, I'm still kind of going back to that because I'm, writing more and more books. So it's, I still think about that. How can you make your world unique? So it's fun, it's humorous, and if you know your fantasy, you can see the references again. And this is the one that spawned this big, huge popularity of the Discworld novel. The Colour of Magic. Now, I'm not going to spoil it and tell you what the actual colour of magic is, because where's the fun in that? You'll have to read it to find out. Disc 1, book 1, there's 41. If you want to kind of join me, I think I'm on book 4 now. And obviously if you're watching this and the series is wrapped up, then hey. But it is fun to read them one a week because you really get into it and you don't forget things, because if you're reading one a week, you're kind of really still immersed in the universe. So it's a really fun thing to do. But check out the Bottled Imp Show anyway. Series 1 is happening now. It's every Monday. And obviously we've got a playlist. So if you're watching this and it's a few months afterwards, then check out the playlist. Thank you so much for watching. And remember to keep it unreal, especially if you know the colour of magic.